Hi all, I'm speaking to you from afar, and I guess with somewhat of a time delay. First of all, thanks very much to Five Islands for doing this book. It's been written over, I suppose 8 years. The first piece was written in 2006, and on the manual typewriter, as indeed 5 of the 6 pieces were originally composed in my notebook and then second draft on the manual typewriter and then typed into a word processing program after that. That's actually an important part of the whole thing. There's a neo-Luddism at work in this book, which is rather ironic given the technology I am now using to communicate with you. I'm very skeptical of technology and its fetishized application. I've had a long history of involvement with computers. I started making them when I was 11 years old, and I learned to program them when I was 15. And like at one stage could speak 3 computer languages. I can barely speak 1 now. There's an intentionality behind that. So, as someone once screamed at me when I wrote one of my neo-Luddite articles, I'll come around if you want. I'd like to come around and not if you want. It was actually a command. I will come around and program your video recorder for you. For those of you familiar with the sayings of the 80s, that was a common one. I can actually do that, but I don't believe in them. And I think that technology can become merely an extension of capitalism. And this book, so those of you who are pro-capitalist, leave the room now, is very opposed to capitalism in all its manifestations. And it's a reasonably nuanced argument about capitalism in there, I think. Some of you may disagree, but I'll leave that to you, because I actually believe firmly that the reader creates the text as much or more than the writer. So it is what you will make of it. But having said that, this is an activist book. All the pieces in here were written for one purpose in mind, and that purpose is to, if not bring change, to facilitate conversations about the necessity, maybe, for change. I am someone who does believe in human-induced climate change, for example. I wrote my earliest poems about greenhouse gases and the like back in the early 80s. So this is not a thing of late discovery of, oh dear, it's too late. This has been, or maybe it's been too late for a long time, I don't know, but I'd like to think otherwise. I think that, and this is what this book's about, that any change that facilitates less damage being done is a good change. So there's never a too late. We're talking now, we're living and breathing, and even the dead for that matter, as far as I'm concerned, have rights, and as all living things do. As a vegan, as some of you would know, it's been a vocal part of my life for the last 27 years. I firmly believe that all living things, and some of the non-living things too, have rights. And this book looks at that as well. It looks at the whole issue of what rights we have or don't have, the whole issue of personal agency and collective agency. As an anarchist, I firmly believe in non-state solutions, in decentralised living, in communal living, cooperative living, shared ownership or non-ownership preferably, but certainly shared usage of things. That may work on a friends level, a family level, or a community level. But I think that that property is a major problem and is divisive and it excludes. This book also explores that. So it's a book of activist poems, and it's largely connected with the landscape. Landscape, of course, as a term, already denotes human interaction with place and human activity. I'm interested in human impact on the land, and there's going to be human impact, but there are ways of of there being human impact. And this book is very concerned about measuring and discussing those impacts and potential impacts. For example, people think of a lovely Sunday walk through the Jarrah forests of Western Australia. They get out there and they discover nature and they become one. Terrific, great. Better than bulldozing it down, which I see a lot of. It's better than going shooting things, which I see a lot of. Much better. But at the same time, you may well be traipsing dieback spores through the forest and contributing to its death as much as the guys on their scramble bikes. So a consciousness of how one interacts with place, especially a place that's already been damaged. All place obviously is damaged the moment anything interacts with it that's trying to alter it outside its normal functionality. So, you can interact and live with the forest without destroying it. I'm not for a moment suggesting that that can't be the case. But I am saying there are some places on the planet where people probably shouldn't go and should be left to their own devices and its own devices. That's a complex thing and requires debate and discussion, which I'm willing to have. It's not a set of instructions. Activism is always a form of propaganda. And though I may rant, and you will find ranting in this work, I hope it's not propaganda. In fact, I'm sure it's not. It's too paradoxical and too disturbed at certain points, I think, to fall into that particular trap. It may fall into many others, but not that particular one. There are 6 poems in the work. Harsh Hakir, Requiem, Harvest Band, The Vision of Error, Hero, The Killing State. The last poem was the only poem not written on the manual typewriter. It was handwritten and then written straight onto a computer. It was written in Cambridge when I was there a couple of years ago. And it was expressing explicit and direct disgust about one of the many executions taking place in America that year. I have campaigned against the death sentence for many, many years now, and since I was 18, and in various places around the world. I feel passionately convinced that there are no circumstances, no matter how monstrous the person may be, for the death sentence to be implemented. I have major problems with justice systems generally, but that's another story. I do believe in natural justice, and I do believe that there is a right and a wrong, and I do always believe in respect for others, and that's kind of the foundation of my belief system. It's why, coming from a family with who are colonists in the mid-19th century in the southwest of Western Australia, who escaped the Irish famine, that act of horrific brutality. Because even though obviously potato blight was brought from elsewhere and came in and so on, the laws the British implemented were as vile and evil as anything done by the worst regimes the world has ever seen, and I think that's forgotten a lot. So my family escaped that, and you can understand. Who they are and who they were in that need to get away. What is more difficult to understand is how they then become part of the persecuting, colonising, dispossessing Noongar people, usurping rights in so many ways. And even though I think a certain amount of absorption and desire for understanding of the ways of, say, a forest, can function as a forest and still, be part of the human world as well. Although that was listened to a certain extent, it was also lost. My family became foresters and farmers, and that's a mixed kind of message in terms of land preservation, conservation, and respect. But it's all in the mix, and I try and explore that. Anyway, getting back to the point. The death sentence is something I feel is always wrong, and this poem tracks one particular execution, as I did some years ago when an Australian was executed in Singapore. I was looking at, obviously, I was trying to stop the person being executed, and one stage the Straits Times were going to run my protests, but the message came from above to stop it, and it never went through. So there's a little story behind that. But the person was executed, and one voices one support for the family and so on. But really, the institution has to change, and not only that, but Australia, which doesn't have the death sentence, has a complicit foulness in the way it doesn't do enough, and in some occasions I think actually vicariously approves of overseas countries executing people from here. Now, I'm an anti-nationalist. It's not a matter of nation, it's a matter of people. All executions are wrong everywhere. So anyway, that last poem is about that, and then looks at it in the broader sense and looks at the kind of the death sentences imposed by colonisation and these kind of things. The other poems, Hero comes out of Akhmatova and deals with oppressions that she wrote about, and looks at early alliterative verse as well. It goes down that path. It goes down a number of different verse paths, if you like. I'm interested in form and technique and how you can play with those for political purposes. All of them, though, are pleas and more for just a request to stop damaging the land. I mean, I live amongst pesticides, herbicides, shooters. People say these things don't exist. Well, if you live where I live and don't see it, then you're part of it, and that is not acceptable. I have seen more things dead and dying and destroyed in my lifetime than I hope whole people see in theirs. It's just horrendous, and something has to be said. Well, I've said it. Anyway, I'm going to stop babbling. I'm going to read a few minutes. I thought I'd start just by opening the opening of Harsh Hakya, or Elements of the Subject's Will. Has a quote from Coleridge, Meanings, Press and Screw. Obviously, these all have philosophical subtexts, and they're all interacting with other texts, and there is a certain amount of détournement in these, and terrific. Ideas are to be played with and pulled to bits, not respected as kind of entities that have to be displayed in a museum. This is a reactionary time, my friends, a reactionary time. Some horrendous things have taken place in Australian poetry and elsewhere over the protectorship of ideas and notions. What are they protecting? Conservatism. That's what they're protecting. These things have to be challenged. And, there's not literal lines and things like that here and there, but it's an interweaving and undoing of ideas that need undoing. 1. All distant buildings, if visible, are white in the late afternoon smoke. It is cold for here, but not cold by the standard of extremities. This morning, to fire the day, a large golden fox sprinted the fence line along the reserve, watched by me, perched on the largest granites, left be. There is an echidna on the block, more evidence below, soft soil softened by fog marks of claws. Diggings around termite scaffolding at the foot of dyed and rebored York gums, roots. The dead have been gathering, and to be frank, accruing. They are phenomenally heavy, like self-doubt or self-belief. A cold wind kills leaves as fast as the close sun sears. Warmth-loving birds will leave if late departing. Mainly waders, we are down at the creek or on islands appearing in the river. Those high-altitude streaks are flights of the retiring. Agro-defence, attack being the best theory of forms. Bloated capo-egoists, mining industry hacks, disciples enslaved, hungering for plasma screen televisions, new scramble bikes, 4x4s. Oh, and the ends meets jobless dichotomy makes mega rich and mega profits on the anniversary of Pac-Man, eating country, no return, gun-loving Second Amendment swoon, energised during the Pacific War, digital game-playing, restricted film-watching 7-year-olds that beat up our 7-year-old, eye of parents repressed in their freedoms. Try living here, you collaborating wankers who vox populi niche markets, stereotypical beatings of prisoners, the bullies themselves who make semi-useful foot soldiers, grassroots. Please place on my grave, he resisted, and wasn't hoodwinked by the lyric or its digressions, remouthings or retextings, nor by epics, nor damned elegies. George Eliot locates wit in the woman who says that X believes the sun rises to hear him crow, or in one of her characters who admires another for saying so. Aesop, I want to tell her, Eliot, of the liturgical swelter of waves, convolutions of body just walking or even sleeping. Lipid light. Planting Hakia prostrata on the steep eastern bank of Berg Gully was an exercise in sonics, each slip of my foothold echoing through arteries of gully and valley, the vein-work. A sharp one, ground cover, to hold and ward off. Ah, ah, ah. Letters don't correspond to sound, no matter your language's harsh Hakia. What blossom coveted by spikes whose clawing flower blossoms? I know no Anna, nor fallings into line calls precedent matters, sublime rivet pox, bonding drain and gutter. Though rain sounds Anna, 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 falling into a bright new tank. We drink a river, we will gargle our puns. Giraffe. Stress a livid syllable, crash a break of live fire from Bindoon Army Camp, the farm. It rocks the granite cap, knee quiver jerk, upright preventative latch, a public grist. The vote or die for, or have proxy do the same. And so I plant, lyrical, vestige, harsh, Hakia. And so on it goes for many pages. Just to finish, because I know that time will be, going on and on. I'll just read a brief extract from one of the later poems in the book. This is from Hero, and I'll read this little bit because the cover, which my brother did, he was basically an aromatic kind of guy who is a Shiro. Shiro surfer, artist and musician who lives in the bush. I mean, seriously, in the bush, a long way out into the bush, and pretty well keeps to himself and does very unusual paintings. Anyway, one of the Neds he's done, with all its parodic implications, is sitting looking side on at you from the cover of this book. And this is from Hero, and this is from part 2, Perched High. Red Ned, green Ned, and the bark-coloured Ned of deadly eyes looking out of town. Scraps of letters, declarations, keep them off my back. Worthies naming names, dressed to kill, riding away, Linton Kwesi Johnson, always capsizing within the shattered dark. Basking in sunlight, soaking it up, the rays, stone hull, inland craft, shattered in capsizing dark to make blood brim. My assertions are subject to nature, by turns red and glowing, by others circumspect blue. A pale blue, not of this sky, an upsetting partial corollary, where I inhabit like wagtails gridding the horse paddock. Frustrating electric fences, connive sui generis to climb up and look out over. What I attribute to water is a spatial glory, a run between cracks and magnitude, a core modifier. Magnifier might have worked there. Core modifier. Water is what I imitate. Weak as the choking river, meagre as the ironies of fog hung out over sewerage. I imply my body, an assertion as actual as elements. Here I participate, a parallelism guessed at, frequented in conversation at least by neighbours, those who collect rent, owners. I am contracted out of flagrant weeds and boutique livestock, ribbons in their hair. Contrasts of virtue and menace require nature mimicry, clang of wire on flagpole, annoying splinters of light that cut out through tint of glasses, but don't obviate the cold. I am a victim of modifiers. I fear my own rhetoric. I displace others as I work and lull into restrictions. For the first time from here, I saw distantly, past shop line and tree line, halfway to heaven, a wedge of birds, explicit and unitary, rogue with programs. They don't get it. They should. Dog-eared structuralists, plasterers, breakers of asbestos sheeting. I don't need maps on my walks here. I am the eye of the map in its radiance. They measure out like rainfall, air pressure. My assertions run to their own rhythms, funerals, protests, and shows swell the town. Elections make for a steady, uncomfortable stream. Pissing and cutting off to get to the right sample. Stats and diesel, descriptions of things we use decanted as metaphor. Turn the tractor on the pinhead, dragging old plant through town. Anyway, that's it. I've gone over time by a few minutes, so I will leave you to it. And thanks very much for coming along. And I hope this is part of a broader debate. This is what we should be doing, I guess, in one way or another, whether it's this or someone else's poem or any event, is talking about issues about being and indeed how long we're going to be and other things are going to be. Okay then, see ya. Bye.